are gradually decreasing in number. So we will be starting with the presentation today. So, Hasu, I'm listening to myself. Do you have some earbuds or earphones that you could use? You can borrow mine, because yours don't work. Okay, so I'm still hearing myself. You will probably need to change the speaker in Zoom. You do it by going to the little microphone picture at the bottom left corner. At the bottom left corner, bottom left corner, at the bottom left corner, there's only one such. Bottom left corner. Yes, amazing. And there you need to click on the little roof above, close to the microphone. Yes, and you choose as your speaker the AirPods. Okay. Now, can you hear me in the earbuds? Amazing. So, we will be repeating a little. So yesterday we were talking about the layers. So we were talking about the hair, body hair, nails, then teeth, and skin. We're looking at the diseases of skin as well. And today we will be talking about the muscles. So there are several kinds of muscles. Skeletal muscles are the muscles that are stuck on the bones. Cardiac muscles are the muscle of the heart. And smooth muscle is the muscle of the intestines and veins and other tubes in the body that need to push things forward. So we will be talking only about skeletal muscle today. We will be looking at cardiac muscle when we come to the heart. And we may talk a little bit about smooth muscle also when we come to the heart and when we come to the digestive system. Probably not today. So let's continue. The muscles are made of tiny little fibers, and they are made even of tinier fibers and even tinier fibers. So muscles are a collection of tiny, very little muscle fibers in bundles, and those bundles make up other bundles, and those bundles make up bundles such as the muscles. So now you'll be looking at how does muscle work. So as you can see, we are now here looking at one of the tiny little fibers, and there are nerves that are attached to these fibers, and these nerves send signals, electrochemical. So they provide electricity, and through electricity, there is a discharge of chemicals. Now, these chemicals then make sure that these so-called filaments will be coming together. As you can see, the sarcomere is contracting and expanding. So there are these things called myosin, and these myosin, they basically grab the other filament, the actin, and drag it towards the center. So here we will see how the myosin is dragging the actin towards the middle. The problem is that the myosin doesn't really have the power to drag it back, to push it back. The myosin apparently can only drag it inward. It doesn't know how to do it backward. So many of our muscles have counter muscles. For example, I'll show you. So for example, on our forearm, we have muscles in the front and muscles at the back. Now, if we want to move the hand this way, then the muscle in front will contract, and that will automatically extend the muscle at the back. So the muscle at the back does not have to expand because it is mechanically expanded by contracting of this muscle. And when the muscle at the back contracts, then this one in front will mechanically, automatically expand because it is pulled by the muscle on the other side. So we usually have a muscle and counter muscle. One muscle contracts, and that expands the other muscle. Then the other muscle contracts, and that will expand the first muscle. So it seems that the muscles do not have the ability to expand, to extend, but they have the ability to contract only. So as you can see, chemicals are needed for this process of myosin dragging the actin. The myosin binds at specific places, and then the contraction happens. So now we are looking at the flat piece of sinew at the top of the head. Maybe you remember that when we meditated on muscles, and when we meditate on muscles, we start at the top of the head. So you can see here that the white portion is the sinew, and the red portion is the muscle. But as you probably can realize, that is the forehead, right? So we do not really have a muscle at the top of the head. We have a muscle in the forehead, but not at the top of the head. There is only sinew, this white thing. It's called aponeurosis, and it's something like sinew, but not exactly that. And then at the back of the head, it seems we have two small muscles. These muscles and the sinew, all of them are actually one piece, but we consider them separately because they're different kinds of tissue. So now we are looking at the facial muscles. There are a lot of facial muscles. That's also the reason why we can do so many grimaces and facial expressions. And we will be looking at some of them specifically. So let's first look at the eyes. So there is a muscle around the eyes. This one that you see on the left and in the middle, we are looking from front. And the one to the right, we are looking from the back. Okay, this is from the back. Now here we are looking at the eyes alone with their muscles. So the eyeballs need to have muscles attached to them so that the eyeballs can turn to the left, right, up, down, and around to the clockwise and counterclockwise and so on. That all is possible thanks to the group of muscles that govern that motion. Now we are looking at the nasal muscles. So we have here a kind of muscle that connects the forehead with the nose. Then we have the nose muscle. And then we have two small muscles below the nose. Now we are looking at the cheek muscles, but more importantly, I want to show you the muscle called masseter. That's the muscle you use for chewing food. So from today onward, I would suggest that when you eat, that you also observe how your mouth is making the movements of chewing. So we need to move our mouth to chew the food. And we can notice three things. We can notice the tongue, teeth, and lips as they are working together in the process of chewing. But the tongue, teeth, and lips are not enough. The teeth, in fact, cannot do anything. They are governed by the muscles. The teeth do not do anything. They just stay there as embedded pieces of tissue inside the lower jaw. So what happens is that this masseter muscle is moving the lower jaw, and the lower jaw then beats the upper jaw. And as it beats the upper jaw, if something comes in, like food in between the lower jaw and upper jaw, then it gets pulverized. Now we get here the tongue and salivary glands, but we will probably look at salivary glands later. The tongue is a muscle. Okay, so we have finished the facial muscles, and we're going a little bit faster. I don't understand why, but anyway, we are going faster. So see if you can catch up. If it's too fast for you, it should not matter. We'll have the recording so you can watch it again. So we have quite a few muscles in the neck. As you can see, we have a very long muscle that starts from behind the ear all the way until the sternum. And that's why it's called sternocleidomastoid. Sternocleidomastoid is written right here. So it connects the sternum, clavicle, and the mastoid process. So sternum, what is it? We'll be looking at it a little later. Is the thing that you have in the center of your ribs. Okay. That's sternum. Clavicle are these horizontally positioned bones by both sides of your shoulders. Okay. And mastoid process is a portion, is something behind the ear. I think it's actually it is some structure in the bone. I'm not sure now, but that's the place where the other end of this sternocleidomastoid, very long muscle, is attached. Over that sternocleidomastoid, there are large, flat pieces of flesh. Hasu, I asked somebody to close the window, but the window is open. What did that happen? Magic? Whenever you do something, try to do it perfectly. And how do you do it perfectly? Do you have any idea how can you do that? How do you do things perfectly? Check it again. Anything else? What was the other way? How you can do things perfectly? So there is a way how to do things perfectly. Let's see if you can do this one. So the key to doing the key for doing things perfectly is that you wonder if you can do it better. As soon as you wonder if you can do it better, well, then there is a possibility to do the things perfectly. Okay. So when you think there's no way to do it better, then that means it is perfect. Okay. All right. So platysma as the flat piece of flesh that covers the sternocleidomastoid. Now we are going to look at the vocal cords. So we will have here several pictures of vocal cords. Let's start with this one. So inside your throat, and this is the root of your tongue. So inside your throat, there are these little flat pieces of flesh, and there is a little, what would you call that? A little space between them. And as these two flat pieces of flesh, as they are touching each other and then separating and touching and separating and touching and separating and touching and separating, then it makes a sound. They touch and separate to create pressure in the air. As you can see, the vocal cords are at the place where you breathe. So the air is obstructed and released at the vocal cords. So the vocal cords decide whether that air will be pressurized or not. And if it is pressurized, then the vocal cords will decide the frequency of that pressure. And that then creates the sound. If the pressure is if the frequency is very fast, then the sound is high. It's a high tone. If the pressure, if the frequency of the touching is slow, well, then the tone will be lower. But there are also other things, and that is the length of these pieces of flesh. So when they are longer, which is in the lady's case, then it is a higher sound. When they are shorter, which is in the gentleman's case, then it's a lower sound. Or so I think, but you can study that and tell me if that was right. Okay, so now let's move on to the back. At the back, we have two very large muscles. One which has a kind of trapezoid structure, or whatever you would call it, a kind of square structure. It's called the trapezia. And then we have latissimus dorsi right below that, which has a triangular shape. It's a very large muscle. But there are many more muscles in the back. It's just that these two are very large. One more muscle that you may like to know is the rhomboids. So there are tiny little muscles called rhomboids that are located at the intersection of the trapezia and the latissimus dorsi. Okay, now we are looking at the arm muscles. So in the arms, as you can see, we have several muscles. So we will have their muscles that will stretch, that will help our hand to stretch, and muscles that will help our hand to flex. So we have there a so-called biceps and the so-called triceps. So biceps means that it is connected to that it is attached to the bone by two roots. Let's call them roots so far for the time being. And then we have here triceps, which has three roots. 1, 2, 3. So these are three roots which attach that muscle to the bone. And then below, as you can see, there's just one. So this is biceps and triceps. We'll later see in the leg, in the thigh, that we also have quadriceps, which has 4 roots. Now here, we will not be going through each and every muscles here, but The idea here is that I want to show you how there are these flexors, which help the hand flex, and how there are the extensors, which help the hand, flexors help it flex, and extensors help it extend. So on the here in the posterior view, so we are looking from the back, you can see highlighted all of the muscles that are the so-called extensors. So these muscles allow the hand to extend. So when these muscles at the back of the hand, when they contract, then the hand will straighten up. And when the muscles on the other side, those from the front portion, when they contract, well, then the hand will flex. So as you can see, there are many muscles that are needed for this process. There are further several muscles that are needed for movement of the fingers. But as you can see, we do not really have muscles at the tips of fingers. We have there, though, sinews. Sinews are all of these white things, okay? All right, now we are looking at the belly. We'll have several pictures for belly. So the belly, the abdomen has a white line in the center. This white line allows access into the belly without any bloodshed. So it's possible to cup here at the white line and get into the belly without much troubles. It's oftentimes used, for example, during the cesarean cut, when the doctors decide that it's better for the child to go through the belly. On the belly also, on both sides, here you see just one, but that's to help you see how it looks under it. So this white covering is also on the other side, it's the same thing. And this white covering, here you see it separately, is basically the same thing that we have at the top of the head. Yet another aponeurosis, a kind of sinew that covers the other things that are below. Now we'll be looking at the complexity of the abdomen muscles. There are 3 layers of abdominal muscles. Look at that. 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 layers of the abdominal muscle. And that makes the abdominal muscle quite complicated. But one of the most famous muscles, though, is the so-called rectus abdominis, which means that it's the abdominal muscle which is straight. As you can see, there are straight lines, and that's probably why it's called so. So we are moving on. We are getting to the diaphragm. So diaphragm is a muscle, and it's a very important muscle for us to live. Diaphragm makes it possible for us to breathe. Without a diaphragm, we die. So diaphragm, what it does is that diaphragm pushes the lungs up. As it pushes the lungs up, then it actually expels the air in the lungs so the air can go out. And then when we breathe in, the diaphragm goes down, so it expands, it helps the lungs to expand, and that is why we breathe in. Okay, so in order to breathe in, you have to push your diaphragm down, and then happens your breathing in. If you do not push your diaphragm down, there's nothing happening. So it's actually the diaphragm that breathes, that does the breathing. Everything else are just follow-up structures. So we'll be looking at the diaphragm a little bit more in detail. Now we are looking from below. Up. So this is the diaphragm, as you can see it from below, but we'll have a little better picture here. So the diaphragm has this kind of dome shape, all right? Here you have, there are some holes needed, of course, for the heart to send the blood and so on. Not sure if all of the holes are here in these pictures, but anyway, the diaphragm is like this very, very, what do you say, oblong. Not necessarily oblong, but it's very deep, so it covers a large part of the middle abdomen. I found it interesting that while our heart doesn't have the heart shape, the diaphragm's sinew portion has a heart shape. Do you see that? See, there's a heart. So I found that quite interesting. Okay, so now we are at the buttock muscles. The buttock muscles are very strong and very large, and so they're called gluteus maximus in Latin language. Then we get the thigh muscles. Thigh muscles are many. Let's look at some of them. So we have here the rectus femoris. It seems that to the scientists, the muscle fibers looked straight, so probably that's why it's called so. Then we have the quadriceps. So here we have four. We have here four roots. It's not easily visible, but probably that's the best we can get. Here we have one, two. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 4 roots, and that helps the muscle to be well attached to the thigh, so that if we want to run, we can run fast. Then we have the hamstring. Hamstring is a very long muscle, and it's also oftentimes abused when people do not train sufficiently, but they dedicate themselves a lot to sport. It's necessary to take exercise before you start doing some sport like football or things like that. Here we have another muscle. That's actually the gluteus muscle. As you can see, the gluteus muscle is not only in the buttock, but it has a large sinew going all the way down, and it's attached to the pelvis very well. Okay, now we are going to look at the calves. So there are many muscles in the calves. Probably one, if you want to remember one, it's the gastrocnemius, which is the largest. And now we are looking at something similar that what we saw in the arms, in the forearms. Maybe you remember that in the forearms, I have showed to you the front and the back of the forearm, so that you see how the extensors extend the forearm and the flexors flex it. So here we have highlighted the extensors, and on the other side are highlighted the flexors. And on the left side also we see it from the back. On the right side we see it from the front. Now in the legs we have a similar thing. So in the legs we have extensors and flexors. So we get here on the left we get the extensors highlighted, and on the other side we get the flexors highlighted. So hopefully it's possible for you to see that they are different. They're different muscles. So these are extensors. These are all extensors, but we want to see the flexors. This is something. So maybe it seems that all the extensors are highlighted, so anything else that's not highlighted are the flexors, or many of them. There are of course some other muscles And still there is, for example, the tibialis, which is the muscle attached to the tibia bone. We'll be looking at it a little later. It seems that I highlighted only the extensors, and whatever are the flexors, they are, here we have 1, 2, 3 flexors. Now they're a little bit hidden behind, so they counterbalance the extensors. So when we want to stretch, so for example, we have the foot like this. If you want to stretch it, then it must be the extensors that stretch it on one side. And then if we want to flex it more, then we need to use the flexors. Now we have sinews. So whatever is white here are the sinews. So we consider both the muscles and sinews, because sinews allow the muscles or make the muscles attached to the bones. Okay, so those are muscles. You can consider, I can see I don't have any diseases for muscles here so far. Maybe if I get some time, I'll add them. So these are muscles and sinews. You consider both of them at the same time together, starting from the top of the head, gradually to the tips of the toes, understanding that they are impermanent. They cause danger, such as cramps and other problems. And they are out of our control. So we cannot really decide whether a muscle will grow this way or that. And if you get rupture, hernia. Do you know what's hernia? Hernia is when your muscle breaks down. So if your muscle breaks down due to a huge weight that you're trying to lift, then that could be a lifelong problem. All right. Usually when you suffer hernia, it is for the rest of your life. Many people who do sport have this problem with muscles. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do sport. It means that we need to be careful when we're taking exercise and so on. Okay, so those were muscles. Now let's move on to bones. So bones. So bones produce osteocalcin, a kind of protein molecule which supports growth of hippocampus and thus indirectly affects the ability to remember one's past experiences. So bones produce a certain chemical that goes to the brain and supports the growth of a brain portion, the brain portion that's used for memory. So as you can see, bones are responsible for your abilities to memorize. If you have good bones, well, then there is a high chance that you will also remember well. If you have bad bones, well, then the chance is lower. Further, bones produce another kind of chemical, osteopontin. This kind of chemical then influences your immunity because it helps in production of immune cells. So bones are behind our memory, and they're behind our immunity. So a doctor, so-called Dr. Gerard Carcenti from Columbia University says, bone is a gatekeeper of aging in the sense that as long as bone is in optimum health, we can have muscle function, memory, and so forth. So bones are very important, and so we need to maintain them very healthy. So now we are going to look at problems with bones. So osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a disorder in the skeletal system where the bone mass decreases, the bones deform, and fractures appear more commonly. So here we see how osteoporosis is usually progressing with age. So the males will have strong bone growth, and usually their bones are pretty good throughout their life. For ladies, starting from about 55 years, they're starting to get more and more bone loss, so they need to be more careful. But unlike the men, ladies are more careful. So in the end, you get men actually suffering more injuries than the ladies. Kinds of fracture. So this is just to show you that there are various ways how the bone can cause pain and troubles. So it can be broken in different places, various times, to different extents. And here we can see how the bones gradually deform as they lose their mass when the person is older and older. But it's not just about the mass and about the different shape of the body, as we have already seen from the quote of the doctor from Columbia University. Old bones have also influence on our memory. So let's look at the bones themselves. So we get here skull. I tried to show each and every bone in the skull. Not sure whether I was successful. I did try hard. So what you get here are the different pieces of the skull. The point of this work is to show you that our skull is made up of small shards. What shards? Or skull shards. Shards means pieces of a pot when the pot gets broken. And our skull is like that, like a broken pot with the pieces glued together. The pieces are not really glued together in a nice way. They're in a very zigzag way, glued. So the idea here is that when we consider the skull, we understand that it's not one nice ball-like structure, but it's actually pieces that come together in various ways. And as they are coming together, there are problems that appear, right? And when the skull gets broken, there are also problems. So we consider the fact that the skull really is not, does not have any particular regular shape or expectable shape. Now let's look at it from the top. So as you can see here, the so-called, do you call them stitches? Yes, they're called stitches. So there are so-called stitches. Nobody stitched it, but it's stitched. It's stitched from the moment that our skull gradually formed. Even the newborn baby still doesn't have fully formed skull. Their skull is actually very soft so that it can continue growing. And only later it becomes harder and harder. These stitches gradually change with age. But by early childhood or by the time of childhood, these stitches are pretty good and the skull is hard. Okay, now let's look at the skull from below. So we can see here the lower jaw. And again, I took time to provide labels to each and every part. There's a nice software for that, which does it very fast and accurately. So it's not that I would like research it, not at all. The software does it for me, but I have to, click where I want to have the label and where I want it to point out and which labels I want and so on. So as you can see, there are several bones in the muscle and in the skull, and we get the lower jaw as one separate bone. The others are stitched together, but the lower jaw is literally separate. It is so separate that if you yawn too much, then it may get dislocated. as is shown here. And it really happens. And the person, when it gets dislocated, cannot close their mouth. They have to go to see the doctor, and the doctor has to apply special force and, correct the jaw. Can happen to any one of us. Happen to any one of us. Now it's funny when it did not happen yet, but after it happens, it's not so funny. So this is a problem of the lower jaw. All right, so now here we have the lower jaw. What I want to show here is that there is no muscle, no bone inside the lower jaw. It has the shape of a horseshoe, and it's just like this, just a U-shaped bone. So whatever is there at the bottom of your lower jaw are muscles and sinews and the tongue and other things. And there are, of course, glands, very important. Now we are looking at the skull from the bottom. Again, I'm trying to show you that the skull is made up of little pieces, of many pieces, but the main point here is this hole. It's the hole for the spinal cord, and because it's relatively big, bigger than the other holes here, it's known as the big hole, foramen magnum. Okay, now we are looking at the different bones at the in the eye sockets. So as you can see, again, we have here the potsherds. What's a potsherd? If you have a pot and it falls on the floor, it breaks down into little pieces. These little pieces are called potsherds. All right, and our skull really looks like these potsherds glued together. So they're not really regular, and it's very hard to understand why would they be stitched in these places. Now we are going to look at the ethmoid bone, or the nose bone. Ethmoid literally means sieve or filter. So that's because the tiny little holes here in the ethmoid bone are resemble a filter or a sieve, S-I-E-V-E. And what are these holes for? Well, they're for nerves. Nerves go through these holes into the nose, and when there is a smell, the nerves are able to pick up on that smell. So that's why the holes need to be there. So this is anterior. We are now looking from front, and posterior means we are looking from inside the skull, from behind. Okay, so this one is from behind. This one is from front. It's a little difficult to understand why this one is from front. Do we have any help for that? No help for that. So you will have to believe. Okay, now we are going to look at the ear hole, ear canal. Ear canal is very small. Let me see if I can show you better. Ear canal. Here it is. So you can see this tiny little hole behind the lower jaw is actually the ear canal. Okay, the ear canal is right here. So we are now going to look, or below that is. So we are going to look at the ear canal separately. So we are looking at the ear canal. So this is the outside skull, this is inside skull, and now we are looking at the path through which the sound goes into the brain. All right, so it goes from outside, gradually inside, and it comes in. But the sound doesn't really come in because it's blocked. There is no real path. All right, it's blocked. And because it's blocked, what comes in are just the pressure of the air. So the air applies pressure on the little drum there, and that drum
further that drum, because of that pressure, because of that vibration, is sending the vibration to different little organelles, and they then send it to the brain, interpreted by the nerves. So we can see here several ways how to look at that. So probably the best way is here at the bottom right corner. So what we see here is actually the way from out into in with faded portions of the bone. So you can see the hearing system together with the bones that are around. Here we get again the path. What I want to show you that there's this cochlea, vestibulocochlear nerve highlighted in pink. So that's over there. Anything else? Temporal bone with ear holes. The illustration of the canal path from outside to the brain. Vestibulocochlear nerve highlighted in pink continues through vestibulocochlear ganglion and then cochlear nerve into the bony labyrinth, which houses the ventricle. So the description says that this nerve goes from inside to gradually to inside, and it connects to the cochlea. So now we are looking at the skull from inside, from above. You can see here the nasal bone, that it has some holes. Here we see the big hole, the foramen magnum, and we see how the interior of the skull is structured so that the different parts of the brain nicely fit in. Now we are going to look at the cavities. Cavities or hollow spaces, right? Hollow space is a space where you get nothing. It is limited by some walls, and inside there is nothing. So we have that kind of spaces in the skull. So these spaces are known as sinuses. These sinuses are simply parts of bones where you get nothing. They're just hollow spaces inside the bone. And we get 4 pairs of them. So here's one pair in the forehead. Another pair is by the sides of the nose. And then we get 2 pairs, as you can see here. One pair around the eyes and 1 pair behind the nose. Okay? Why are they there? Scientists are not sure. Some say that the hollow spaces are there because with these hollow spaces, our sound sounds better. Our voice sounds better. That's one theory. Another theory says that thanks to these hollow spaces, our skull is not so heavy. So we'll be looking at the filling of these spaces, so you see better how they actually look like. So as you can see, there is one big blob. Here's another big blob. I have apparently removed, I don't see the nose here. I have removed the nose bone from here. So we get 2 big blobs, two big hollow spaces, and then we get 2 another hollow spaces above the nose, and then we get tiny little hollow spaces behind the nose. Why do they call them a pair? That I don't know. We have here another way how to see it. So here you can see that there are, oh, I see. So I need to zoom out. So here we get the forehead. I have cut out this bone in the software that I use, but of course, all of these hollow spaces is just 2 big blobs. I kept a little bit of the bone there, so you are clear that this is indeed the forehead bone, the bone in how to say that, the portion of the skull in the location of forehead. Now here we see it from a different angle. So here we see again the blob that's next to the next to the nose on both sides. And here we see the tiny, tiny little hollow spaces and the larger hollow spaces. Now here we see it alone. So we get the forehead sinuses, then we get they call it frontal sinus for the forehead. And then these are called sphenoidal sinus, which means nose sinus. Sphenoid. Well, that's not really that's definitely not nose, but they're the sphenoid sinuses are behind the nose, and then we get the maxillary sinus. That should mean that it's attached to the upper jaw. I'm not sure why is that so. Okay, and then we have here the so-called suprabular cells, which are the tiny little hollow spaces right behind the nose. So what happens with these? Why are they so important in our life? Because when we catch cold, they get swollen. And when they get swollen, our sound changes. So people can recognize when you catch cold because the walls of these hollow spaces, now you see the walls. So these walls of the hollow spaces get swollen. That means they enlarge. And as they enlarge, there's less space, less hollow space. So the voice changes. Now we are moving on. This is the skull from below, but it also is, and I have it here only in Burmese, so I will translate it back to English. So it means that there is spine, skull, below, and spine. So we get the spine here. As you can see, the spine is made up of small pieces called vertebrae. Vertebra, spine, you can write here, made up of vertebrae. And they have each a hole inside. What's that hole for? Well, it's there for the spinal cord. Now we are looking at the spine. And the aim here is to see that there are spines on the spine. Probably that's why it's called spine, because there are spikes at the back. So now we see the spine more realistically. In between of each and every vertebra, there is a so-called cervical or spinal disc. Or how do you call them? Vertebral disc. So these vertebral discs are very important. Thanks to these vertebral discs, which are soft, it is possible for us to move our back and neck smoothly. However, when we get old, then sometimes the liquid in these vertebral discs discharges. And so the vertebral disc deflates. And so it is no more soft. And it doesn't provide that soft cushioning between the vertebrae. And then what happens? Well, then because the nerves are no more cushioned and they are rubbed over by the strong bones, by the hard bones, it is pretty painful. And it happens quite often, especially in the neck. So you can see here that the spinal cord is embedded inside the holes of the vertebra, while the vertebral bodies, or so it's probably called, are separated by the vertebral discs. So now we are looking at the spine in its entirety. So spinal column, it has 33 bones. Okay, it's 33 bones, 7 in the neck region, 12 in the chest region, 5 in the belly region, 5 in the pelvis region, and 4 below. Okay, so we get 33 bones that make up our spine. So let's move on to the chest bone. So we get here clavicle, all right? Clavicle it's also known as the collarbone, gets easily broken if you fall on your chest. And then we get clavicle, and then we get scapula, which is also called something shoulder blade. So shoulder blade or scapula is the flat bone behind your shoulder. Now we will be looking at the attachment of the arm bone to the scapula and of the femur bone, which means the thigh bone, to the pelvis. As you can see, the attachment is different. The attachment of the arm bone to the scapula is really not secure. That's why it's so easy to sprain this place, to sprain the shoulder. But as for the thigh, it's much better secured, and so it's much more reliable. So we rarely see people injured at this point, but we see very often people injured here. However, while it is very necessary to have full freedom to move your arms, you do not really need to move your legs that much. You just need to walk. Well, some are gymnasts and so on and on, but more or less, you do not need to have that much freedom in your thigh. You need a lot of freedom in your arm, so that's why it is not secure. Okay, so now we are looking at the similarity between the limbs. So we have 4 limbs, that means 2 arms and 2 legs. Now the 2 arms and 2 legs have a similarity. All of the 4 are attached to the torso, to the main part of the body, by one relatively large bone. Then this relatively large bone starts to branch into 2 thinner bones, as you can see. And then these 2 thinner bones are connected to even thinner bones by the so-called cubical bones. That means bones that have the shape of cubes. We'll look at them a little later. So now let's see how the humerus is branching into the 2 bones. So I'm not sure why did I use this particular photo. Anyway, so I see now. I understand. So I wanted to show you here the humerus, the main bone, that the big bone that's attached to the torso, to the main part of the body, and then the 2 smaller bones, that's clavicle and they're radius and ulna. So we get here radius, which is the thicker bone, and then the ulna, which is clinging, which is attached to them. As you can see, it's not really well secured. Unlike the radius, which is very well secured, and we'll be looking at that. So it's actually the ulna. So I got it all wrong. So ulna is apparently the bigger one, radius is the thicker one, and ulna is the thinner one. So that's what I said. So it was right. But that which is very interestingly attached to the humerus is not radius, it is actually the ulna. Ulna is attached to the humerus, and it's attached from behind. So it is attached there. It's basically grasping for the humerus. So this is ulna, this is the humerus, and ulna branches into the fingers, whereas humerus is attached to the chest. So, or to the scapula. So here I have faded the bone Here I have faded the bone of the ulna so that you see what's actually behind. You can see it's almost the same picture, except here we can see that the ulna is transparent. And we can see that the ulna is really attached to a kind of circular or round shaped end of the humerus, while the radius is just placed under. Of course, all of these muscles are very well kept together by the muscles and sinews, especially by the sinews. But some bones are better secured than others. Now we are looking at the cubical bones. Probably doing something wrong. Let's try it. Okay. So we are now looking at the cubical bones. So as you can see, there are many cubical bones. Each and every label here is pointing out to a different cubical bones. So there are quite a few. Oh, and then of course we get the phalanges. So these are the bones that make up our fingers. So the bones are named the same for all fingers. So I provided labels only for the pinky and for the thumb. It's called pinky, right? Or the little thumb. Okay, so now we're going to look at sternum. We are already talking about sternum when I explained to you the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is the longest muscle of the neck. And now we are going to look at the sternum separately. So the sternum has several parts, as you can see, but the part that I want to point out is the xiphoid process. So that's over here. It's the tip. So learning how to use PowerPoint. So here, this xiphoid process, the tip of the sternum is fragile. And why is that important? That when you give somebody CPR, which means when somebody cannot breathe, or they drowned, or they wanted to commit, they were lost to suicide by hanging themselves, there's sometimes still an option to help them get back to life, even to somebody who hanged themselves. But of course, you need to come on time. And to do that, you press, you probably all have seen it. So you press their chest at the position of the heart and help, basically, you encourage the heart to restart beating. And as you press, you may press wrong. If you press at the moment, at the point of the xiphoid process, then not only that the person still may die if you're not successful, but also you may break their xiphoid process. So the problem may get even worse. And imagine that you are stressed so much that somebody you love, or somebody you know, or you care for, or just somebody is going to die. You're so stressed that you want to help them the most, but as you're helping them, things get much worse as you hear cracking of their bones while you're trying to help them. Okay, so we need to be very careful, and we should avoid breaking the xiphoid process. There's a trick to do that. I forgot it, so please, nobody hang yourself or drown yourself near me, because I cannot help you. Okay, then now, of course, nobody should ever drown or hang themselves ever anywhere for any reason. And we continue to the sternum and the breastbones and the ribs. So we have here the sternum here in its entirety. You can see again the tip of the sternum, and we will be looking at the ribs. Yes, here there. So we have 24 ribs, 12 ribs on each side. And there is an interesting thing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ribs, 7 pairs out of these 12 pairs are directly attached to the sternum. The remaining pairs, namely the remaining, well, 5 pairs, right? The remaining 5 pairs, 5 pairs. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's right. The remaining 5 pairs are not attached directly to the sternum. 3 of those 5 are attached indirectly, and 2 are not attached at all. So the ribs are not really, coming in a nice regular shape. They are having the kind of shape that they are having. Not sure why. So now let's look at the pelvis. So I have colored some parts of the pelvis and some not, so that you can easily distinguish them one from another. There's no other reason why I colored some and not the others. So we get here the sacrum, we get the coccyx, ilium, pubis, and ischium. And the main point that I want to talk about here is the coccyx. When you fall on your bum, for whatever reason, what is the painful part is the so-called tailbone, or the so-called coccyx. Why is it there? Why is it there? So some people believe that we have the coccyx there simply because we evolved from the monkeys, and the coccyx is what remained. Well, I would say that maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's there so that it protects the remaining parts of the remaining bones. Because when you fall on your bum, it's really the coccyx that goes first, and nothing else goes. So the coccyx actually protects all of the pelvis and basically all of the rest of the body. So could it be that the coccyx is there to protect us, to protect the pelvis, rather than as a proof for evolution? Well, in Buddhism, we do have some teachings on evolution and some and not really. So that's a little complicated thing, but we'll be looking at that very soon. So now this is the pelvis from the other side, from back. So again, we see the coccyx here from back, and the other parts. Yes, I will be now dealing with the pelvis for some time. Now we are going to look a little bit at the evolution idea. So according to the evolution theory, and it's really still an evolution theory because there are still some tiny points that are hotly discussed. But according to the present idea, we humans are actually have descended from a kind of rat species. So if you don't like rat, whenever you see a rat, you can say, hi, my brothers and sisters. So we have evolved from a kind of shrew. It's not really a rat, but rat has evolved from shrew, and we also have evolved from shrew. Interestingly, in Burmese, shrew, the word in Burmese for shrew means an ugly rat. So if I say that we evolved from rat, it's not too wrong. So we can see here the genealogy. We'll get human here, also somewhere here it is, human. So let me see if I can show what I want to show you. I see. So the point here is just that we have the same ancestor. So here we have human, chimpanzee, gorilla, orangutan, and so on and on. And we have here the shrew. So the shrew is like rat, but you can see shrew is having a similar ancestor about 96, I think, billions of years ago. But we are much closer to the tree shrew. So what's a tree shrew? Let's look at what's a tree shrew. Tree shrew. So that's a tree shrew. So say hello to your distant relative. All right. So we can see here at another, I think this is another source. Yes, these are two different sources. This is nature.com. This one is from Pearson Education. And again, we can see that the humans, we're probably understood as primates. So the humans and the shrews and the bats as well. And bats as well. We have a similar ancestor. We have the same ancestor. All right, now a little bit of difference between the male and female pelvis. So in the Buddha's time or in our scriptures, we can read the so-called Mahosadha Jataka. It's one of the longest stories of the Buddha's previous lives. And we learn how Mahosadha was very wise and clever and how he could serve basically as a judge, as a very righteous and very knowledgeable judge for people. So he was judging who committed the crime, who did not, and so on. And Mahosadha, the Buddha to be, one time saw that skeleton, and he needed to decide whether the skeleton was from a man or from a woman based on the skeleton. And what he did, he looked at the skull, and based on the stitches on the skull, we already looked at that, he was able to distinguish the male from the female, and he was able to see that the skull was a female skull. But I was trying to find if today's science has any kind of such knowledge, but I couldn't find it. It seems that really stitches on the skull are not something that is reliable. However, one thing that's quite reliable, and still there will be some exceptions, is the size of the space between the two pelvic bones. The gentlemen do not need to have it large. They have it smaller. Ladies need to have it larger because a baby is supposed to go through. So gentlemen, the skull, so the skeleton of gentlemen can be distinguished by relatively smaller space between the two pelvic bones. And I have rotated and prepared and photographed the bones here so that you can see it also from back. So we can see indeed that there is a difference. Okay. Now we will be looking at the difference in pelvic bone between the Europeans and the Asians, or Asians and non-Asians. So it has been found out somehow that the Asians, we call it, angle of their pelvis is a little bit different. As you can see, it's a little bit lower than the Caucasian. Caucasian means European, American, all of that is Caucasian. I wonder whether there would be difference between African, because Caucasians are absolutely not African and Asians are also not African, but I actually didn't even search that. So there is definitely a difference between Asian and Caucasian pelvis. So we do not really choose how our bones look like. Our bones look the way that they look. They look the way we deserve and the way that is suitable for the environment where we are born and where we live. Sometimes, however, they don't. So we suffer illnesses and weaknesses and troubles and so on. So we do not really have power over this body. Now we are going to look at the so-called sciatica nerve. Sciatica nerve is a large nerve that goes from the lower part of the back all the way until our feet. The sciatica nerve is very important for us to have the sensations in our legs and feet. But because it starts at the lower back, it causes problems. And it causes problems, especially for those who meditate. So when you meditate, your vertebra here, they press one on another. And as they press one on another, they also press on those nerves. As they press on those nerves for a long time, then you lose feeling, you lose sensation in your feet or in your calves and thighs and so on. It's because your sciatica nerve was pressed. It's natural and it's fine. These nerves in particular are super fast in regeneration, and there's no worries if you get numbness. That's why I said, I think I did, I said, and I say at least now, that whenever you have numbness in meditation, do not worry, but make sure that when you finish your meditation session, you nicely change into your secondary posture and you wait at least 1 or 2 minutes until your nerves nicely regenerate so that you can happily meditate without losing any sensations. When I was 18 years old, I didn't know about this, so I did not follow the proper procedure. The secondary posture is my invention. I've never heard anyone teaching about primary secondary posture. I invented secondary posture because at one time I was teaching in Australia, little kids, and I saw that the kids, they're changing their posture about 10 times every 2 minutes. And I was wondering if there is a way how I can prevent that. Because I can imagine this was very unpleasant. Imagine it, that you're meditating, you're supposed to stay without any movement, but you change and change and change and change and change, but you don't change because you're peaceful and happy, you change because you're not peaceful, because you're not happy. So I saw that really the kids were suffering a lot. So I invented this concept of primary and secondary posture, where you stay in your primary posture as long as you can, and when you have pain, you stay in secondary posture only for maximum few minutes. So the secondary posture is always comfortable. And that way we can make sure that you do not need any third posture. We're always fine with 2 postures. One, where you meditate as long as you can until you get pain. And the second one, which is only for relief, which is always the happy posture. So that's where I invented secondary posture. Until then, I didn't know it. And so I was changing also postures different ways and experimenting various ways, but I was actually very strict and I didn't want to change. And because I didn't want to change, then I did not change. I did something else. For example, I hit my legs, or I would lift my knee, or I would slouch my back. And so gradually I developed numbness that was permanent, or it's also called chronic numbness in my foot, I think in my left foot. And I left it like that. I thought, this will surely get better, no problem. And for about 6 months, I didn't do anything about it. The numbness was so big that even outside meditation, if I wanted to take shoes, I would have to hold my foot and hold the shoe and push the foot into the shoe because I didn't have feeling in the foot. So after 6 months, then I thought maybe I should do something about that. So I went to see a doctor, and I thought it's a problem with blood vessels. So the doctor sent me away saying, no, this is not a problem with blood vessels. You need to go to see a neurologist. So I went to see a neurologist, and neurologist gave me several shots into my bum. And after about 3 or 4 months, I fully regained sensation in my foot. Now I am totally healthy. No problem, no numbness at all. So it is possible to heal it. So it's not like a catastrophic problem, but do you really want to go to hospital and get shots every 2 weeks? So we want to avoid that, and that's why I have recommended to you the secondary posture. So nicely follow secondary posture. Do not lift your knees. Do not slouch your back. Do not beat your legs during meditation. It doesn't help. Okay, so now leg bones. Leg bones. So we have humerus. Here we have the tibia and scapula. So tibia and fibula. Tibia and fibula. Fibula is I remember it because it's similar like feeble. So it's the thin one is fibula. Tibia is the strong one. And here I want to show you several attachments. So first, the one we have already seen, the attachment of the femur, the thigh bone to the pelvis. Notice that the sharp spike is out. Okay, the sharp spike is out. Then here we have the 2 holes. This hole serves for the femur. This serves for the muscles. So if you ever get how to say that, um, assembling parts for a skeleton like I did, and you need to construct a skeleton, remember, you need to use the smaller hole for the femur. Now we are looking at the femur from front, and this is from the back. Now another attachment. So this is the attachment of the tibia to the femur, and we can see here that the patella or the knee bone is not really attached by a bone or by a mechanic way. It's of course attached by the muscles and sinews. Now here we see yet another way how the tibia is a thicker bone and the fibula of it is attached from behind. And here we see the ankles. Ankles are not really separate bones. Ankles are just portions of the larger bones. So here we see the outer ankle, which is the part of the fibula bone, and here we see the inner ankle, which is part of the tibia bone. Ankles are not separate bones. Now we will be looking again at the cubical bones, which are quite a few. And then there are the phalanges. Now let's look at some disease. So here we get disease in the bone. It's called calcaneus spur. Calcaneus spur. Calcaneus means that it's made of calcium, and spur means that it is sharp. So it's a sharp point made up of the bone tissue. Okay, it can grow here. It can also grow here. And when it grows, it's very painful and you can do nothing about it. We will see. I'll do my best. So we have here the calcaneus spur, and we cannot really do anything about it. You simply cannot walk, or if you walk, you have to walk very slowly and it's very painful. You never know when they appear in your feet. Sometimes they appear when you're 50, 60, sometimes they may appear earlier. There is no way how somebody can tell whether you will have it or not. Okay, now here I want to show you the arc. So arc means that something is round. So here the foot, the bones are in a round shape and they're filled by muscles. But we know about the Buddha that he had flat foot. Some people believe that flat foot is a disease, but doctors do not immediately say that it's a disease. Flat foot is a disease when it causes you troubles. If it doesn't, it's no problem. I personally met a man who has flat foot and has no problem at all. It was in Sri Lanka. He was a monastery worker for my professors at university. Okay, so that's bone. All right, and then we have bone marrow. So bone marrow is inside the bones. Bone marrow is inside the bones, and we get two kinds of bone marrow: red, which is here outside, and then yellow bone marrow is here inside. They, however, are usually located somewhere else. So we get red bone marrow, which is behind production of blood, and yellow bone marrow, which is behind production of fat for the body. Okay, so the yellow bone marrow is located in the shaft of the longer bones, like the femur or like the humerus, the arm bone, and the red bone marrow is usually located in the heads. But yellow bone marrow, which produces fat, cartilage, and bone, is found in the shafts of long bones, such as femur. Red bone marrow, which produces red and white blood cells, and also the platelets, is found in the skull, the breastbone or the sternum, then in the shoulder blades, hip bones, and the ends of femurs and humerus. So to simplify, you can remember yellow bone marrow is in the shaft of thigh bone and arm bone, and red bone marrow is in the skull, in the hip bones, and at the ends of thigh bone and arm bone. So bone marrow is also one part that you will be considering. So let's review a little bit. So we get the layers. So today we have finished fully the layers. So we get the hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, and then we get muscles and sinews, and then we get bone and bone marrow. All right. You can consider bones all separately from the skull all the way to the tips of toes, but you can also, and then you would consider the bone marrow separately. So you would go skull, the humerus, the ribs, pelvis, and the femurs. So that's all for today. As the lecture. Anyone has any question about the layers for observing repulsiveness of the body? You will not be meditating on repulsiveness body yet, but the intention is to provide you with the necessary information so that tomorrow you are ready. Anyone has any question at all about what I've just said? No question about that. So now we'll start the interviews. So I would like to ask the organizers to turn off the live streaming.